There needs to be a coordination between the ramp up of electrolyzer capacities and the start of the operation of the pipelines. I see that coming in the next month. Pretty optimistic that, let's say, between 26 and 28, we will have quite a portion of hydrogen already running through the backbone that is now on the paper, at least for Northeast and Northwest Germany.
Hello and welcome to Energy Unplugged by Aurora. This podcast features various experts from Aurora having in-depth conversations with key industry leaders, policymakers and academics from all over the world. It explores the hottest topics across the energy market and gives a unique perspective on major energy issues. This is a special episode featuring Alexander Voigt, co-founder and board member of HH2E. Alex is one of the speakers at the Aurora Hydrogen Conference 2022, taking place on Wednesday the 9th of November in London. We hope to see you there.
Welcome to Energy Unplugged. I am Thekla von Bülow, co-head of Advisory Central Europe at Aurora. I have the pleasure to welcome back to the show today Alex Voigt, founder and CEO of HH2E. Alex was already part of episode 60 of the Energy Unplugged series back in August 2021. Today we will deep dive into the topic of hydrogen and its potential for sector coupling and decarbonization in Europe. The discussion we're having today is going to be continued with industry leaders at Aurora's first hydrogen conference, which will be in London on the 9th of November 2022. Energy enthusiasts and followers of this podcast will certainly know Alex, or at least one of the companies he has founded. They include Solon, Younicos and Lumenion. Alex Voigt studied physics and is a really impressive pioneer and serial entrepreneur in solar and battery technologies. In 2021, Alex founded the cleantech company HH2E together with Andreas Schierenbeck, Uniper's former CEO. Since then, the company has received funding from Hydrogen One and Foresight. Alex, it's great to have you back. Welcome back to the show.
Great to have the opportunity to give you an insight of what has happened since 21. Happy to be here.
Great, yes, exactly. So that would exactly be my first question. What has happened in the hydrogen economy since 2021, but more importantly, what has happened with HH2E since you really founded the company in 2021 and you have come a long way since then. And maybe it would be good to start off by explaining to our listeners what HH2E is and what your vision is for the company. How is it going to change the energy landscape?
Yes, I mean, if we are looking on the whole way to decarbonization, I think the easy part of the path to decarbonization we have already behind us. You know, in the EU with percentage between, let's say, 25 and 50% of renewables in the grid, that was the easiest way of the path. Now, if we are looking on the next years, what will happen is that we don't have any longer the possibility to go on the easy plains. We have to go up in the mountains. We will have some years with pretty steep adventures for us, and this is what is HH2E for. HH2E comes into play with its technology and its mission when it's about to integrate the high production peaks of renewable that are a factor of 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 maybe over the load that you have in a certain section of the grid. And how to deal with these peaks, this is what it's all about.
Really interesting, yes. And we'll talk more about the technology actually, because there's a lot to it on how actually electrolyzers can be run effectively and efficiently in the current energy system, and what policy is also playing into this whole sector. But kind of as a first step, HH2E is focused on Germany. It's a German company. You certainly have ambitions of moving also into other or countries as the hydrogen economy will further develop. But let's focus on Germany first, I would say. So Germany has a goal of 10 gigawatts until 2030, which is a lot. But if you compare compare it to the actual net zero path that Germany is on, we will need a much more ambitious hydrogen economy to develop. And when you look at the current pipeline of electrolyzers for the moment, at least the pipeline is double the size of the targets that we will see in 2030. So that is quite promising. On the other hand, it is quite sobering to see that there is, for the moment, nearly no substantial capacity operational in Germany. So are you confident about the hydrogen development in Germany and the projects that are in the pipeline? Do you see a big risk of them not being implemented? So how confident are you about the whole ramp up of the hydrogen economy?
You know, I hope that a lot of different worlds that I see in the moment will find together, and we will see a successful path forward. In the moment, what I think is we have on the one side, let's say the traditional renewable energy business, that's project development in wind and solar. There, the last government had this class ceiling, you know, with this 52 gigawatt of PV installed, the same also a ceiling for wind. And that is how they dealt with it. They simply said, we don't install more because after that we will see problems. Now the new government took away that ceiling. The new goals only for PV are above 160 gigawatt until 2030. And in the same time, they are working on, which is from my point of view, really good. They're trying to speed up the permission periods to get all the permissions to build it. But what remains unresolved by that is the connection to the grid. And even if you can connect to the grid, is what to do with all this energy in the time when it's produced. To give you an example, we are talking to a small distribution grid operator in north of Berlin. They have 600 megawatt of load in their district and have now requests for more than 10 gigawatt of solar to be connected today. It's not a pipeline, it's requests they have today. So how to deal with this situation? And I think we have to bring the solution for this one with the growth plans for hydrogen. We have to bring these pieces together. In the moment, our government looks completely different goals. We have set goals, as you mentioned, for electrolyzers, 10 or 20 gigawatt, it's the discussion. But I think we have to discuss hydrogen much more as a solution, which will enable the success also on the other side, and that is the ramp up of the renewables in this country. So we have to look towards a more systematic approach, and I think that the usage of electrolyzers to become a stabilizing and enabling part of the energy transition is the thing that we are working for.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I think the main challenge is really the really fast ramp up of renewables that are required. And it's certainly not enough just to have targets on national level, but we are seeing there is substantial hurdles on more local levels and local permitting procedures that take a lot of time and still way too much time, but also other hurdles on the renewable build out that come in, such as supply chain issues and just simply workforce that is lacking. So there's a lot of challenges ahead, but it looks already like a brighter future for renewables now, as you're saying, with the cap being lifted. And hydrogen is a really interesting component, as you're saying, in terms of peak shaving, but at the same time also being able to utilize surplus renewable energy and convert it into hydrogen in times of cheap power. And so this whole aspect of system integration is quite an important one. And talking about the technology here, because in effect, the way you are describing hydrogen electrolyzers is basically as a very flexible technology that can react to the volatile renewable production that is within the nature of renewable production. But what I'm currently seeing is that a lot of electrolyzer projects require near to base load power supply in order to provide a constant flow of hydrogen for instance, refineries, etc. And what I'm mostly hearing, and I don't have a technology background, so I'm keen to hear your perspective, is that it is not at all suitable for hydrogen electrolyzers to ramp up and down, basically using it such as a kind of a hot water a boiler. What's your perspective? So what is the optimal way of running an electrolyzer, and how can it be best integrated in the system given the technology constraints that we're seeing?
You know, to answer that, I will quote Bill Gates on a conference in Pittsburgh a few weeks ago. Bill Gates was asked by the energy minister in US what is among his more than 100 participations in the energy sector in the moment the most promising innovation that he's bringing to the market. And what he said is, I have a small company that brings the functionality of battery and electrolyzer together in order to enable 100% renewable energy supply from wind and solar. And I mean, in Pittsburgh, this sentence was taken by the audience with huge applause. I mean, in Germany, we are doing that since years in the development phase, and nearly nobody is recognizing it, but it's nevertheless truth. I mean, what we need is a technology that takes, on the one side, the energy as it comes from wind and solar, that is in peaks and not with a very high number of hours. And on the other side, supplies hydrogen as the system requires it. That means it needs to be stable. It needs to come 24 hours a day. It needs to come predictable, regular. So all the two things have to be met. And I think the problem is that the technologies, it doesn't matter whether it's PEM or alkaline, that have been developed in the past, normally standing very close to huge hydropower plants or nuclear power plants, are not alone on their own, are not alone to be the ideal companion for wind and solar to enable decarbonization. You need the storage part. And what we believe is that this is done much easier on the electrical side of the system for the short-term buffering than on the hydrogen side with pumped pressure tanks and stuff like that. I believe that the buffering side on the hydrogen is more on the seasonal side, where you use large caverns, where you have pipeline networks, so you can use an overproduction in the summer season. You can put into huge cavern storage systems to work as a backup system for the cold and cloudy winter days. But the technology that I think needs to be developed, and the market will require that, and I think also the industry will deliver this, is a combination of energy storage and hydrogen production.
Yeah, and you're bringing up a really interesting debate, which is, should the electrolyzer be positioned in the site of the power production, or is it better positioned in the site of the off-taker? And the main question is obviously what is easier to transport. And currently, the reality is that power is much easier transported than hydrogen, because hydrogen infrastructure is basically not there. So the pilot projects that we're currently seeing in Germany are all electrolyzer projects that lie there where the infrastructure is there, and basically where the demand sectors or the demand volumes are also there. Which doesn't correlate to where the renewable sources, which oftentimes, if you're looking at solar, would be in the east of Germany, wind in the north of Germany, whereas the big demand centers are in the west of Germany. Some of them are in south, the west of Germany. So do you see this probably as kind of the first phase of the hydrogen ramp up, that it's this way around, and as soon as there's a more liquid hydrogen economy, we will see more of the vision that you have?
I think the answer is not the one or the other. I think we will see both developments. I think that because what we are really interested in is a decarbonized hydrogen. So if you have smaller decentralized systems, they will always come along also with wind and solar installations. And so in a way, even if you are in the south of Germany, you want to secure a financial feasible and also clean energy supply, I think you will come to the point where you also start to develop renewable energy, wind and solar projects alongside with your electrolyzer. I believe simply the installation of an electrolyzer and asking the system to do all the investments that are needed to bring the electricity to the electrolyzer, I think this is not a really good approach if it comes to larger scale industrial offtake. I think it is necessary to have the hydrogen production separated in a way in two worlds. I say the one side is what a typical landscape in Germany can take as size of wind and solar projects in the south. This might be something in the double-digit megawatt scale for solar and wind. Combine that also with a reasonable portion of the energy to be converted in hydrogen, maybe also in the tens of megawatt electrolyzer range. But this is only producing a smaller part of the overall needed hydrogen in our economy. I think the installation close to big transformer sites where you have also enough land to build really in the gigawatt scale renewables and to build the hydrogen integration plants, HH2E werke in these regions, and then with access to the hydrogen backbone, so to pipeline systems that is bringing the hydrogen number one to storage systems where they can also be seasonally stored and secure really a 24/7 availability. And on the other side, bringing the hydrogen to industrial centers, that makes really sense. I mean, transportation of hydrogen in pipelines seems to me a thing that we can work with. I mean, transportation costs are not small, but I think up to 2,000 kilometers, you can work with that. And so we will have two developments: larger scale hydrogen production close to the large scale renewable, which is more the northern part of Germany, and a really decentralized system with a hydrogen production very close to the off-taker, linked also to decentralized systems more in the south.
So what I'd be interested in is to hear when you expect a sort of liquid hydrogen market to be there. Because the main challenge is, besides building the electrolyzers as such, is also the hydrogen backbone, as you just mentioned it, which requires obviously a massive upfront investment for either converting existing natural gas pipelines into hydrogen pipelines, or actually building new pipelines, so greenfield pipelines. The additional challenge that I'm seeing is that the war in the Ukraine and the gas crisis has now led to an increased importance, especially of the natural gas pipelines in Western or Northwestern Europe, which will now be required to transport natural gas much longer than would have been anticipated with would the gas have continued to flow from east to west. So the investment case is a really difficult one for hydrogen pipelines for the moment. And in addition, there is a bit of a chicken and egg, I would say, into securing the volumes, the demand volumes required for a stable business case, and with that for stable financing of the pipelines, where the demand really struggles to commit at this point, where it's very uncertain how the volumes will get there. So what is your perspective on it? Are you also seeing these large risks and projects being on hold on the pipeline side, or are you more optimistic?
To be honest, I'm more optimistic. And if I look back the last 8 months, I'm much more optimistic than 8 months ago. I mean, the main reason for that is that we are now sure that the gas from Russia will not come back on a short-term period, and we definitely have to orient us in other directions. What I see as the most probable thing is that you will have a discussion which side to connect on the pipeline system in order to get the right throughput to start also an operation. I mean, these pipelines have an enormous transportation capacity, and you can only run them in a certain window. So there needs to be a coordination between the ramp up of electrolyzer capacities and the start of the operation of the pipelines. I see that coming in the next month. I'm pretty optimistic that, let's say, between 26 and 28, we will have quite a portion of hydrogen already running through the backbone that is now on the paper, at least for Northeast and Northwest Germany.
Yeah, and linked to that question, actually, because this is quite a German thing, is that Germany in the ramp up of the whole hydrogen economy is really banking on green hydrogen. So, for instance, CCUS in Germany is still banned, and it's on the agenda again of whether this needs to be reconsidered. But that certainly excludes a big role for blue hydrogen in Germany, where at least the carbon captured needs to be exported to other countries. What is your perspective on the color of hydrogen? Do you feel this is the right approach to be very restrictive in the color of hydrogen? Talking about the volumes again that are required really to have a stable business case and to invest into these technologies?
I think the color discussion is a discussion that I really don't like very much. Every liter of diesel, kilogram of coal, whatever, comes with a CO2 footprint. And so it also is true for each kilogram of hydrogen that you ship. And we should simply have on focus that the whole change to hydrogen makes only sense if we go big steps forward into decarbonization. If you have turquoise hydrogen and you know what to do with the carbon that's coming out, I wouldn't be too much in thinkings of we should only do that or that. But I think we should focus on a systematic approach that secures the energy transition at all. The ramping up of the renewables that we definitely need, and I think this is not questioned, not even by the people who are talking and setting their bet on blue hydrogen. I don't think that they general want to do everything with gas or also with, the same thing that you now use for blue hydrogen. You can also, so we do everything that we do with gas now in the future with blue hydrogen. I don't think that the economics on that will work out, because then you end up again in 100% gas world, and we have problems with the supply in the moment only for the portion that we are giving to the gas in the situation. So if you want to have the installed capacity of wind and solar, we have to face the problem that if you want to have 100% electricity supply based on fluctuating generation, you will end up with something like between 40 and 50% of excess energy. And this is what is, in a way, the feedstock to produce green hydrogen. So this is a good fit in the system. Without having the right fit to take off the peaks in something that makes sense, will end up in nowhere. That's why I think, and my energy is only focused on green hydrogen that is helping to integrate the peaks of wind and solar. You know, my background was in photovoltaics. I'm fighting and working on technologies to integrate solar in a way that you have 24/7 safe and secure energy supply. And if you want to do that, you cannot simply waste by regulating all the installations down. You will not get the problem solved. The green hydrogen is a must-have for the decarbonized future.
Yeah, I mean, couldn't agree more. I think on the blue hydrogen, there's just countries like the UK, for instance, are taking a very different approach on blue hydrogen, with really the ambition to really ramp up the hydrogen economy. Blending, for instance, is also a topic that in the UK is very accepted, while in Germany it's seen as a waste of hydrogen in a way, because we are banking on the green hydrogen. So the approach is quite different. And then on EU level, when we look at the quality that is required for green power to produce green hydrogen, this is putting quite a challenge, because we have these three criterions around additionality, so bringing in new green power into the system for the production of hydrogen, as well as temporal correlation, up to a 15-minute correlation between the production of power and the hydrogen production, as well as the local correlation, which effectively makes it quite difficult in Germany to get power for the electrolyzers, because you need to close PPAs, and then you need to be very selective with the kind of assets that you can close. So just getting your reaction on these criteria, because there is quite a debate going on EU level where they might be relaxed again, especially on the aspect of temporal correlation, in order to enable projects to close PPAs more easily and actually be able to get these electrolyzers up and running.
The problem is we need additional and huge amounts of additional renewables anyhow to meet the EU goals, right? So nobody is putting a question mark officially on the upscaling of the renewable generation anyhow. If you have this generation, you will have certain periods of times, approximately 2,000 hours, where we have by far too much electricity production than the established market players can take. So this is in a way the time where definitely electrolyzers are needed to be a good off-taker of this electricity. There are surely 2,000 hours on top where it makes sense to have the electrolyzers running in parallel, but it makes no sense to have a running time of electrolyzers that is very flat and coming from a time more or less of the stable flatline power production from nuclear and wind, because we will not have these kind of requirements in the future. Everything needs to be flexible and in a way performance driven. So we need the offtake of electrolyzers exactly in the hours when the renewable energy system is producing a surplus. And these are exactly the hours when also the market signals will give you a buy signal, because the prices will be very low. From my point of view, the most important part in the equation to calculate the cost of hydrogen is the energy that's sitting in 1 kilogram of hydrogen. Yeah. So anyhow, we should focus on the cheap hours of the market. These are the hours when wind and solar are producing close to peak production. And we should leave all the other hours in the system to the users of electricity that really need the electron itself, and not competing with our hydrogen production against heating our living rooms or heating up the water for the tea.
Yeah, and this is where, again, the debate comes in about the integration of storage systems, also be it on the power side or on the hydrogen off-taker side. So there's interesting business cases between large electrolyzers and a combination with storages, which frankly needs some kind of natural endowment or natural storage to be in place in order to make economic sense. But the combination of battery and the power system could be quite interesting as a co-location, for instance, to the electrolyzer business cases.
Yes, and if you look on how to secure the energy supply in a decarbonized world, I think we have learned now how important it is to build a resilient system and not only have an eye on the effectiveness. And if you look on that, I think we should really develop an architecture of the decarbonized energy system and have a conclusion where we want to end up with this transition. I think this is the discussion that I would really like to see in the upcoming months and years. because I mean, everybody's talking about energy transition. The source of energy for most of the people using this world is clear. The energy should come from wind and solar without CO2 on its back. But solar and wind are only generators. This is not a full operational energy system. And now we have to discuss really well how to build the architecture of an energy system. And for sure, this answer, from my point of view, could only be given if you have a European-wide view on that.
Let's go a bit deeper into that, because I think this point of resilience has become really a topic on top of the agenda when we talk about energy and the energy system, especially all the topic about energy supply and, in my view, a very decentralized and flexible energy system that is working and that is really integrating lots of different aspects, such as we said, renewable production, batteries, and the production of hydrogen is going to make the energy landscape much more resilient and much less prone to some sorts of attack or default or whatever you want to call it. So that is becoming an additional strong point, I say, for the decarbonized vision that a lot of people had for years, but weren't able to, ramp up fast enough. So kind of talking about the EU vision, because, for instance, there's a lot of discussions around a common purchase of natural gas for the EU. How do you see the European hydrogen economy in the sort of work out? Do you see the hydrogen economy as a European economy, or is it something that will be developed on a national level? I'd be keen to hear your vision on that part.
I think if you want to build an architecture for a decarbonized Europe, I think you should do this in different levels. The being of renewables is decentralized. So a lot of the production and consumption should be combined on a decentralized/regional level. For sure, it doesn't make sense to build complete autonomous cells. I mean, there have been also research programs in the last 10 years. But if you would set in place an architecture where you have on a regional /commune/energy community, whatever level, and part of the energy system where as much as possible is locally produced, locally consumed, then you have the next level, which is more a national level, that is working for the smaller level, which is mostly driven by smaller industries and private households. You have a level where you integrate consumption and production on a national level, which is more to supply big industrial centers, large cities like Hamburg, Berlin, large computer plants, and large consumers. That also brings together larger installation, wind parks, offshore, storage systems, but still might have a lack of capacity to provide 365 days of energy. And on top of that, what I see is more a level that could be reached if you integrate also the European markets through a backbone system that is also coupled with larger capacities of hydrogen storage, where I imagine you could have a business system where the overproduction that we will see in all the seasons from March to October, if we reach this larger installation plans of solar, where you have hydrogen flowing from the south more to the north, from Greece, from Italy, from Spain, and generating also income for the Southern Europe. I mean, we have this problem in Europe also with the trading balances between the southern part and the more richer northern parts. And I think it would make a lot of sense to focus on how much hydrogen could we buy in the future from the southern part of Europe instead of simply sending more and more debt on their shoulders. So I think a European system that in the end is, let's say, the last level that integrates also through the storage functionalities, that has a possibility to deliver the hydrogen that is needed to fight also the very cold and dark days where everybody's afraid of. That such a three-layered architecture, that would be, from my point of view, something we should think about.
Yeah, and I think this is also really the way to go. The aspect that you haven't mentioned yet is really what I would call kind of European hydrogen imports, so really locations outside of the EU, such as, for instance, North Africa, which you could combine or tie with a pipeline to Italy, or make use of the existing pipelines to Italy and Spain. A pipeline potentially, or using the pipeline with the Ukraine, for instance, once hopefully the terrible war is over, could also be a really big potential for rebuilding their economy and providing hydrogen to big demand centers such as in Germany. So I wonder how you're seeing about hydrogen, not just pipelines, but also obviously the transport via ship through hydrogen vectors. Because in effect, when you look at how much renewables are currently being built in countries like Germany, the expectation is that around 2/3 of the hydrogen needs in Germany, for instance, will not be able to be provided domestically, but will have to be imported somewhat, either from the EU or from other countries.
I think our view on that will develop as it has already done in the past. When we did the IPO of Solon in '98, we were asked how much PV is possible in Germany. In these days, I mean, the world market was 80 megawatt a year. Our idea was something 2010, it could maybe be 3 gigawatts. And the institutional investors always said, okay, they are nuts, and decided not to go with us. In the end, I mean, number one, we did our IPO successfully. Number two, we ended up above 10 gigawatts. And now we are talking about hundreds of gigawatts to be installed in Germany. And I think if we are along another 5 years, we will also talk about more than 1 terawatt installed only in Germany. We will see that, because if it comes down to facts, the surface, the land is not the problem. If you look to Spain, to Italy, to Greece, whatever, I mean, we have more than enough land that is converting into desert, and in a speed that nobody from us can really completely understand. The discussion will change. And if you also see concerning the production capacities, the Chinese that have in the moment between 100 and 200 gigawatt capacity in their industry have announced that they will pass the 1 terawatt production on the silicon base, which is the most important bottleneck for solar. They want to pass that until 26. That means in 1 year, they will produce enough solar cells to power a country like Germany. So I think the bottleneck will not be the supply of solar modules. It will also not be the land. The whole thing will become cheaper, not more expensive, as we see in the moment. And I think this, if you model now how a future would look like if you take these assumptions into your model, I think we will move towards a green hydrogen economy much quicker than everybody from us thinks. And you're absolutely right. I mean, everything that you can transport via pipeline, whether it's from the Ukraine, whether it's also from Bulgaria, also Libya, Algeria, Morocco, this all is feasible if we get the right understanding and contractual basis for the long-term investments and the long-term offtake that is needed to finance all these projects. I think, I mean, in the European community, we are linked together through the euro. We have to do something to keep this currency stable. And I think the more we can do to help in that space, securing energy supply, the better it is.
And just to follow up, so in other words, you wouldn't put your money into an ammonia ship transport of hydrogen. Is that fair to say?
I would not put my money in ships at all. No, but I think green ammonia will be a really big thing, but I think the market pressure on ammonia will stay very high, and I think it is not something where you will produce a huge fortune with. I think, to be honest, the most flexible and most valuable part is the H2 molecule, because you can do a lot of things with it. And unfortunately, H2 alone will never be shipped. That's my view in the moment. And I would be happy to be corrected by that. But I see no possibility for that. And my heart is also with securing the H2 molecule green and as cheap as possible to everybody who needs that in the economy to produce value out of it.
Exactly. So if you transport hydrogen the cheapest, so the pipeline, obviously, there the question is always, how far are we creating a new dependence on some countries if we build pipelines? Again, really important aspect in the current debates. And if you look at the transport via ship, the transport in the form of ammonia is by far the cheapest. However, there obviously you lose a lot in the conversion and reconversion into hydrogen. So the question really is in how far this is a viable product in comparison with a domestic production. So I think that generally we're looking for ramping up the hydrogen economy domestically, but we will certainly require some substantial parts of hydrogen imports, at least for some of the countries like Germany. So the task is really to be able to ramp up renewables as fast as possible and as much as possible, so that we can use the green electrons also for the production of hydrogen. It's a really interesting discussion, and we could go for hours, and I would suggest we continue that discussion at Aurora's Hydrogen Conference in London on the 9th of November. It was really interesting to hear your perspectives, and especially your vision for the energy future, and the vision that you had for solar was more than exceeded. So I'm keen to see where your hydrogen vision will be in a couple of years' time. Thank you very much for having made the time today and for having been the guest on the show today.
Thank you, Thekla.
That was Thekla von Bülow, principal at Aurora, talking to Alexander Voigt, co-founder and board member at HH2E. Do keep an eye on our podcast feed for more in-depth conversations with senior members of the energy industry. The best way to do this is to subscribe on whatever platform you use. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.